Okay, to begin, we would just like to thank you for joining us today for our interview for our criminal justice class and talking about gender-based violence.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so we were just going to ask you some questions about our gender-based violence, and which is also commonly known as domestic violence, based on your experience in your police force. But we want to talk to you a little bit about your background in the police force and your work also in the community. So your rank and anything like that you have to say about your work.
Yeah, so I was hired in June of 1998 at the North Little Rock Police Department, which is right in the central part of the state of Arkansas. The population is around 66,000. Once I completed the police academy, I became a patrol officer. And then throughout my career, I remained a patrol officer. I never actually chose to be promoted to advance because my love was for the communities and the neighborhoods.
Mm-hmm. What all did you do in the community? I know I heard a little bit about how I think our professor said you did like donuts or something like that. So
Yeah, well, I mean, I've done a lot throughout my career. The biggest thing for me as a police officer was to get out of my police car, right? You can't drive up and down the streets every day with your windows rolled up because that will form a disconnect. What I did early on in my career is I would stop, get out and talk to people, not with a pen, not with a notepad, just to get out and get to know people, get their stories, form those relationships. But then more importantly than anything else, you have to come back. So once you show up, you have to come back, and that's one of the biggest things for me. But I would come in the morning with the kids at the bus stops. I worked day shift the majority of my career, so I would show up at the bus stops in the morning and bring snacks, bring donuts, throw the football. If I see an elderly person sitting on their front porch, I would get out and sit on their front porch with them. I mean, the police car, the badge, the uniform, that is not going to earn you respect, right? You actually have to work towards that, and that's what I did. I mean, 27 years is the total number of years that I worked as a police officer here, the city that I grew up in, and so it was a big honor. And there's so many opportunities to give back to the community as a police officer, but once again, you can't do it sitting in your car. But and I say there's opportunities. You can be patrolling down the street. You can see a group of kids playing basketball. Get out and see if you can join them. Someone having a cookout in their front yard. Get out and introduce yourself. You won't always be accepted, but you have to earn that.
Mm-hmm.
Did you always know you wanted to be a police officer?
No, I thought I wanted to be a nurse at first. I was a CNA at a nursing home, a hospital. But my uncle was the chief of police of a small town here in Arkansas, and I would see him, visit him, and he would have his uniform on and the shiny boots, the squeaky gun belt, the really nice, clean police car, and that's really kind of what got my attention to want to be a police officer. I thought police officers back then were like superheroes. I mean, they were someone that young people really looked up to. At least back then, they did.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right.
So to dive more into like the topic of our project, if you've been on any or how many you have noticed, how many domestic violence calls, once again, have you been on or have you experienced within your department?
I would say 20. And after 27 years, gosh, it would be in the hundreds. Domestic violence calls.
Wow, that is
That's a
lot.
crazy amount.
And then within those domestic violence calls, do you think that the calls, your response to the calls differ from other officers based on your communication and relationship within the community?
Well, that's a great question. A lot of times, the police officer sets the tone, right?
Mhm.
So there's a good chance, as involved as I was in the community, if I respond to a domestic situation, there's a good chance I'm going to know the individuals, right? And so when you have that reputation as a police officer and you walk in someone's living room and there's been an argument and they see this officer that they know and they trust and they respect, a lot of times that can diffuse the situation. Or you could be a police officer that has mistreated people, that has screamed and yelled at people and got physical with people. And then if you show up in that living room, that's going to make people feel uneasy.
Mhm. How did you prioritize like your actions when you responded to like a chaotic like domestic dispute?
If it's chaotic, people are screaming and yelling. Obviously, you're the police officer there. You're there to restore order. So if it is still chaotic, if it's screaming and yelling and physical, obviously you do what you can to separate the two. And if it's just verbal, once again, I was blessed even before I became a police officer with some pretty tactful verbal skills, right? And so you want to separate them. You want to get both sides of the story. You also want to be fair.
So your like verbal communication has to play like a lot in it, like your verbal.
Yeah, I would say, verbal judo, as we call it. Yes, it plays a big role because, once again, domestic calls are probably the most dangerous calls a police officer can go on.
Mhm.
And you can go in there and you can make things even more volatile, or you can kind of reduce the tension that's taking place.
All right.
And then based on your experience for the calls that you went on or you witnessed, do you think that it was more common for the calls to be just a verbal altercation or even sometimes physical, or were weapons commonly involved?
I would say that I would say probably 50-50 on the verbal altercations and the physical altercations. And sometimes there are weapons involved.
With being like a male police officer, like what's your experience being the male police officer responding to like a domestic call where like the male is the victim?
Well, that's something, some people tend to think that, perception is reality when it comes to domestics, and that the man is always the one that goes to jail, but that's not true. There have been instances when I responded to domestic disturbances where the female has went to jail. Now, more often than not, it was the male, but it's not out of the ordinary where a female was the aggressor, and I would treat that call the same way.
All right.
And then kind of bouncing off the question she just asked, did you think that sometimes if it was a female victim, being a male officer, it was harder for the victim to trust you since you were a male?
Well, once again, me personally, that goes back to my communication skills. But if there is a female officer in the area or in the district that the call has taken place, then I would be probably more comfortable having that female officer there to relate to the female victim or the female offender.
So have any of the calls that you've been on like before your retirement that have given you like a different outlook of like your policing job?
Domestics or just overall?
Both.
So in domestics, it's I've learned that just the simple arguments that could have been avoided, or what comes after the simple arguments that could have been avoided, is even in other people's lives, it's best to separate, right? It's somebody leave, somebody go to another room. There's always a chance that there's kids that are going to be involved, and it always, with the heart that I have, it always broke my heart that when I showed up and kids witnessed their mom and dad into it, especially when it becomes physical, screaming and yelling, that can cause a lot of distress and even PTSD for young kids. So it really, I guess, benefited me to know that even in my personal life, when you have an altercation or you have a disagreement with someone, how things can get out of order so fast. I think overall, being a police officer, I know to count my blessings because I patrolled areas that are really impoverished, poor neighborhoods, and that life could be so much worse for me seeing what other people go through.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And then to kind of wrap anything up, is there anything else you would like to share? This can be gender-based violence related or just anything in general.
I think, with people that see this, especially the young people coming up there in college that may want to be police officers or in law enforcement, is that my motto has always been, as a police officer, your badge should have a heartbeat and not an ego. And, you can't go through your career as a police officer thinking that you're better than everyone else, because you're not. You do have a job. You have an important job to enforce the law, but you have to treat people the way you want to be treated. You can go in the neighborhoods when you talk about community policing, and you can change neighborhoods. You can really develop this relationship with the citizens to where ultimately you can be considered a family member, right? I've been invited to birthday parties, graduations, weddings, hospital visits, sometimes unfortunately funerals, and but it's a job that not everyone can do, because it takes a lot of patience, a lot of wisdom, and there's not a lot of people that are cut out for that.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's all we have for you today. Thank you so much for joining us and being willing to do this interview with us.
Thank you. Y'all be safe and keep me posted.
Will
We
do.
will.
All right, take care. Okay.